Gene often said, "I don't think about legacy. I just hope people remember me as someone who tried to do good work. For that, and so much more, you will live on in our memories." My buddy, may you rest in peace. Actor Gene Hackman was more than that. He was an iconic figure in Hollywood who had the power to elevate any persona to the status of a legend. Hollywood was shocked and in sadness as word of his death spread. Under unexplained circumstances, a movie icon and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, had passed away. The public was much more shocked by the stories from Hackman's closest friends and family members than by the actual loss. According to a close source, this isn't as simple as people think. There are things about Gene Hackman that the public never knew. What happened in that house might make us all reconsider how we view his final days. These enigmatic comments simply stoked further inquiries. What really transpired in the last minutes of Gene Hackman? Was this a natural death, or are there unspoken secrets in Hollywood? The feeling of confusion persisted, even as tributes came flooding in. As Hackman's old friend Clint Eastwood put it, there was no greater actor than Gene. But this is just too baffling. Not only does Gene Hackman's death signal the end of a cinematic golden age, but it also raises a ton of unsolved concerns. Let's examine how Hollywood and the film business responded to this startling incident before getting into the mystery surrounding his death. Hollywood was not just in grief, but also experiencing an unfathomable feeling of anxiety as word spread of Gene Hackman's and his wife Betsy Arakawa's deaths. A guy who had been in the public eye for more than 50 years, a cinematic icon with a legendary career, had now quietly left, without saying goodbye. Morgan Freeman's voice faltered as he brought up Hackman in the in memoriam part of the 97th Academy Awards. "Our community has lost a giant, and I have lost a dear friend." The crowd erupted in applause, but everyone knew that words could never fully express the scope of Hackman, an actor who consistently elevated his roles beyond himself, turning each one into a part of cinematic history. Hackman was regarded with the highest regard by Clint Eastwood, who had worked with him on the classic Unforgiven. There was no actor greater than Gene. He had the instincts of a genius, never a false moment in his performances. "I will miss him dearly." The conversation's director, Francis Ford Coppola, said Hackman, "An actor you encounter once in a lifetime, someone who could make you believe in any character he became." However, there was still a persistent uneasiness underlying these offerings. In 2004, Hackman withdrew from Hollywood and almost vanished from public life, opting instead to live a peaceful life in New Mexico. He turned down every interview and never appeared on film again, not even for a brief cameo. When his death was officially announced, many people started to question, had Gene Hackman always known that this was how he would pass away, quietly, without fanfare, just as he had disappeared from Hollywood 20 years before? Hackman was described by Hanks as a true gem of American cinema. Glenn Close said, "I have never seen anyone act the way he did. There was something about Gene that pulled you in, as if he was always hiding a part of his soul on screen." In the meantime, Peter Bradshaw of The Guardian wrote, "Hackman's passing marks the end of one of the greatest eras in American cinema. He wasn't just a phenomenal actor. He brought a depth and authenticity to his roles that was unparalleled. This loss is not merely the end of a life, it is the closing of an era." However, sadness is not the only emotion that permeates the atmosphere. Sorrow is slowly giving place to unresolved questions as information about Hackman's death comes to light. In addition to leaving Hollywood in sadness, Gene Hackman's death has left many things unresolved. The public feels uneasy due to the enigmatic circumstances surrounding the deaths of him and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, even though many thought he had chosen a quiet life away from the limelight. There was no indication of violence or forced entrance. However, their remains were discovered in different rooms. It was established that Hackman died on February 17th, which was almost 9 days prior to their discovery. So long, in fact, that it raises the question, why didn't anybody realize they were gone? Daniel Lenihan, a longtime friend of Hackman's, said that the actor's health had seemed to deteriorate dramatically in recent months. He had quit riding his bike every day, something he had done until he was in his 90s. Known for being a loyal companion, Arakawa had been taking every precaution to keep him safe, particularly in light of his persistent health issues. But why didn't anybody know whether Hackman's health had been declining? Why hadn't somebody checked on them earlier? The mystery has only been heightened by scene details. 2 of their 3 dogs survived, but one was discovered dead next to the restroom. There were no obvious clues as to what caused their deaths or indications of a break-in, according to authorities. Prescription drugs were found strewn all over Arakawa's body. But is there more that we don't yet know? Or was this just a coincidence? Speculation has been stoked by the original report's lack of openness. Some speculate that Hackman could have died first and that Arakawa was too distraught to bear the loss. Others believe that they may have been impacted by the same illness at the same time. Conspiracy theories have proliferated on social media, ranging from the idea that Hackman may have known his time was coming to the likelihood of an unidentified ailment. One thing is certain despite all the conjecture, though. Gene Hackman's passing signifies more than simply the passing of a legend. It leaves a deep enigma that hasn't been resolved. Authorities are still working to find the truth while the number of questions keeps growing. However, is there a new information that can alter our perception of Gene Hackman's last days? What's more, will that truth ever come to light? Official findings from the inquiry have only sparked additional concerns as speculation about Gene Hackman's unexplained death persisted. A maintenance worker from the residential complex where Hackman and his wife Betsy Arakawa resided became alarmed on February 26, 2025, after failing to get in touch with them. As he looked through a window and saw Hackman's dead corpse lying still in the foyer, a feeling of worry began to creep in. Authorities were on the site right away. When they got into the home, they discovered Betsy Arakawa's corpse laying in the bathtub. There were no indications of violence or struggle, and the house was strangely calm. One noteworthy item, however, was discovered next to Arakawa's corpse. On the table, like missing parts of an unfinished jigsaw, were a number of prescription drugs, including ones for thyroid problems and high blood pressure. Although the specific method of their passage is unknown, one thing is certain. They had been there for days without anybody noticing. The Santa Fe County Police quickly began an inquiry to find out what killed Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, shortly after their corpses were found. There were no indications of any kind of disruption or forced entry at the site. There was no sign of conflict or violence, and the home was still together. According to an initial forensic investigation, there were no visible wounds on either Hackman or Arakawa, and there were no indications of violence or force. Authorities decided to rule out foul play as a result of this. Carbon monoxide poisoning, a frequent cause of unexpected fatalities in confined places, was one of the first ideas that investigators took into consideration. Officials from the fire department thoroughly inspected the house to look for any heating system leaks. However, neither the air nor the toxicological samples from Hackman and Arakawa contained any carbon monoxide, according to the data. The enigma was just made deeper by this. What had really transpired within the home if there were no outside influences? Data recovered from Gene Hackman's pacemaker allowed investigators to make a significant breakthrough. His heart stopped beating on February 17th, about 9 days before his corpse was found, according to analysis. This verified that Hackman had been dead for a few days prior to the alarm being sounded by the maintenance worker. What had happened to Betsy Arakawa in the days that followed, however, became a more urgent issue. Why hadn't anybody noticed anything out of the ordinary if Hackman had died on February 17th? More significantly, why hadn't Arakawa sought assistance or phoned for emergency services? According to one opinion, Arakawa could have gone through a serious health crisis when her spouse passed away. She could have been unable to perform due to a sudden medical issue, psychological shock, or tiredness. Investigators discovered a number of prescription drugs, including ones for thyroid and high blood pressure, close to her corpse at the site. Nevertheless, there was no obvious proof of an overdose or unintentional drug abuse. Speculation was further stoked by another perplexing detail at the site. Officers found that 2 of the couple's 3 dogs were still alive inside the house, but one of them had already passed away. This prompted a number of inquiries. Did their living situation have an effect on their health in any way? Or was the dog's death just a coincidental event? Authorities have broadened their inquiry in light of all the data gathered, looking into anything from possible environmental risks to underlying medical issues. However, one thing is clear. Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's deaths are more than simply a terrible loss. There is still plenty to learn about this persistent enigma. Gene Hackman left behind more than simply a storied career. He lived every stage of his life to the fullest and was a guy of determined decisions. Many remembered Hackman's 2004 disappearance from Hollywood, an uncommon move for a celebrity of his caliber, as word spread of his and his wife Betsy Arakawa's unexplained deaths. Actor Gene Hackman was more than just that. He was an iconic figure in film, giving each role he played vitality and nuance. Over the course of his more than 50-year career, Hackman made a lasting impression on Hollywood history with roles that varied from gritty and dramatic to really legendary in some of the most acclaimed movies ever made. Gene Hackman, who was born in San Bernardino, California on January 30th, 1930, had a difficult beginning. He spent the most of his early years living with his mother after his parents split while he was still a little boy. He enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps at the age of 16. However, he struggled with various jobs after leaving the Army before choosing to follow his acting ambition. He met another budding actor, Dustin Hoffman, at the Pasadena Playhouse. At first, both were written off, even called untalented and incapable of becoming professionals. Hackman, however, was unfazed. After relocating to New York, he gradually established himself by appearing in modest theatrical shows. When Hackman played Buck Barrow in Bonnie and Clyde in 1967, that was his big break. He received his first Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor as a result of the huge popularity of the movie. His career took off after that. However, Hackman really rose to the A-list of Hollywood in 1971. In addition to earning him his first Oscar, his portrayal of Detective Jimmy Popeye Doyle in The French Connection established a new benchmark for strong, unyielding police protagonists in motion pictures. Hackman's unvarnished portrayal and the film's suspenseful pursuit scenes solidified The French Connection as one of the best crime movies ever made. In the next years, Hackman kept demonstrating his range. In Francis Ford Coppola's 1974 film, The Conversation, which was full of moral quandaries and psychological strain, he portrayed a haunted surveillance specialist. Additionally, he played Lex Luthor in Superman, 1978, giving one of the most iconic villains in movie history a blend of wit, danger, and comedy. Hackman continued to be at the top of his game throughout the 1980s and 1990s. In Clint Eastwood's iconic Western, Unforgiven, 1992, he received his second Academy Award for his portrayal of Little Bill Daggett, a brutal but nuanced sheriff who made an impact on viewers. In addition, he appeared in highly praised movies including Enemy of the State, 1998, Crimson Tide, 1995, The Firm, 1993, and Mississippi Burning, 1988. Hackman kept up his impressive performances into the 21st century, especially in The Royal Tenenbaums, 2001, in which he portrayed a fascinating but severely damaged dad. During his lifetime, Hackman was married twice. Christopher, Elizabeth, and Leslie Hackman are his three children from his 1956 marriage to Faye. In 1986, their almost three-decade marriage came to an end. He subsequently married pianist Betsy Arakawa in 1991. This was a pivotal moment in his life as he progressively left Hollywood to live a more sedate life in New Mexico. In his final years, Betsy stayed by his side, out of the limelight, and they had a modest life together. After a distinguished career that included more than 80 films, Hackman announced his retirement in 2004. He dedicated his time to writing, a new interest of his. Unbeknownst to many, he co-wrote a number of adventure and historical fiction books. He continued to cycle every day in his senior years, enjoying the outdoors and avoiding the mayhem of Hollywood. The world is only now starting to realize how much of a legacy he left behind. Hackman left behind more than simply iconic movies. He left behind a remarkable life narrative. His career was nothing short of extraordinary, spanning from an abandoned childhood to years of hardship to becoming one of the finest performers in movie history. Even while the exact cause of his passing is still unknown, one thing is certain. Gene Hackman had a life that deserves respect. Just as quietly as he had departed Hollywood 20 years earlier, Gene Hackman passed away. Even yet, his legacy will endure eternally despite his absence. Hackman was more than simply an actor, as shown by his well-known parts, many honors, and the admiration of friends, co-workers, and fans. He was a legendary person whose influence on the history of film will never be erased. Even though his life is coming to an end, the backstage tales are still being told. The most unexpected thing is that Hackman's three children from his previous marriage, Christopher, Elizabeth, and Leslie Hackman, all remained silent after his passing. Not a single public acknowledgement of their father's death. No tributes, no remarks. His passing is being lamented by Hollywood and the rest of the world, yet their silence pierces the grief like a sword and begs innumerable questions. Did the Hackman family have internal conflicts that the public was unaware of, or are they just holding out for the ideal opportunity to speak up? When the matter of inheritance is raised, the situation becomes much more complicated. Over the course of his more than 50-year career, Hackman accumulated a sizable fortune from personal investments, real estate, and movie royalties. His will, however, has not been made public. Will his children and his wife's relatives face legal issues, or will his whole inheritance be given to Betsy Arakawa, who died with him? According to some reports, there may have been underlying tensions for years, and Hackman's passing may have been the trigger that caused them to emerge. The mystery surrounding him is only getting started, yet a legend has passed. In the event that the reason of Hackman and his wife's deaths is still unknown, a new chapter in his legacy's history may begin, one that is characterized by conflict among his surviving family members rather than Hollywood glitz. Is the quiet of his kids a sign of things to come? Or are they really making the decision to protect privacy for a parent who has spent his whole life evading needless attention? The answers could be disclosed shortly, demonstrating that Gene Hackman's narrative is far from over. How do you feel about Gene Hackman's unexplained death? Is this just a sad coincidence, or are there secrets that have not yet been discovered? Do you wonder about the family dynamics that Hackman left behind given his children's silence? And with his inheritance still up for debate, would a court case be imminent? Leave a comment below with your opinions. Do you think that Gene Hackman's secrets will all be solved in the end? To keep up with this developing story and to discover more behind-the-scenes insights on Hollywood icons, don't forget to press like and subscribe.